Welcome to episode 339 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 19th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast says something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at @LMS_United. On Threads and Instagram, you can find me at School Librarians United and on Bluesky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now for today's episode, Librarian in the Wild, and my conversation with Wenndy Pray. Friends, I'm so excited. Wenndy Pray, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It is fabulous to see you again, my friend, and to talk to you.
Well, we've been apart for a while. I feel like, it has been quite a while since we've been in the same space together, and you did some fantastic recordings, and I knew I wanted to connect with you, and I'm so glad we have this opportunity. So, can we just pause for a minute? Because I think that this really does set the tone for the conversation, because I was looking at through some of your social media posts, because you've had some fairly big announcements, big announcements. And on Facebook. But you self-describe on your Facebook profile as human sunshine. And I'm going to say, for as long as we have been friends, which, forgive me, does go back to 2021.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Salt Lake City, when we met in person.
Yes, ma'am.
I have to say, you are human sunshine. You embody the sunshine, and absolutely, I have never known you on a bad day.
They do exist. And you know what? They do exist. Absolutely they do. But I wanted to just give a shout out to our dear friend, mutual friend, Dr. Andrea Trudeau, because she is the one who said, Wenndy, you're like human sunshine. I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, you know what? I love that bit. I'm going to take it. I'm stealing it. And she's like, steal away. So I started using that when she told me that. She called me human sunshine. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to own it. Why not? Let's do it.
Well, and I've never known Dr. Trudeau to be anything but incredibly candid, and her observational skills are spot on. So absolutely,
That's right.
Yes. And you know
That's
what?
right.
I would absolutely take that for what it's worth, because given that she is Dr. Trudeau, she is certainly going to call him like she sees him.
That's right. That's right.
We met in person at Salt Lake for AASL 2021, which is wild.
Right. Yes. My first AASL ever.
Mine as well. It
was. Awesome. Yeah. And it was great.
I just saw a stat on social media like yesterday that, what is it, 51 or 53% of
53,
53% of the attendees going to AASL 2025 in St. Louis. This is their first time going to AASL.
Yes. So I am part of the National Conference Planning Committee for AASL and in St. Louis. And my co-chair, Melissa Corey, who's fabulous. I just love her to death. She is a fabulous person. She is co-chairing the social media committee with me. And we were at one of our meetings with the national conference, like everyone, like the programmers, the authors, panels, everybody. And that stat came out, and we were just floored and super excited at the same time, because I'm like, 53%, that's over half. First timers, like imagine the vibe. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. If you guys are not following us, hashtag AASL25, get on it. Follow that hashtag. We have a bunch of cool things for those 53%ers and for everyone else too. who, like me, it's been a while since we've been to an AASL, but we have a lot of tips and a lot of things that you should know before you go type of stuff. So if you have not followed, please do.
Well, and I think what is funny, because I remember one of the very first things I said when I was in Salt Lake City, and I wasn't overwhelmed. It's because I think overwhelmed comes across as being negative. I wasn't overwhelmed at all. I was like a kid at Christmas. And I was like, why don't we have this every year? I said that in all sincerity to somebody who clearly knew. I think they were giving me directions or showing me where I should go or something. I'm not quite sure. But clearly I was the rookie. They were part of the planning committee. And they're like, well, this is just, there's too much to do to try and do this every single year. And I was in Salt Lake City and already sad that I would have to wait 2 years before Tampa in 2023. And I mean, I was having I was very aware that I was sad, even though I was in like the happiest place on earth. It was my Disneyland, my Disney World. But I was like, why can't we do this every year?
It's going to end. It's going to end. And then I'm going to have to wait 2 long years.
I know.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it.
Exactly. And here I was, it hadn't even barely started, and I was already as upset that it was going to be over.
No, I totally get you.
I commend you for being that volunteer who works on the planning committee. I'm sure it has consumed a great deal of your bandwidth, which is wild because this is the year you started a new job. And we'll get into that. We'll definitely get into that.
We will.
But I do want to back up because you and I have to credit you with being a very early supporter to my efforts to have a pretty much a weekly show and to have an episode very regularly. And so you stepped up. We did episode 121, Student Ambassadors, 145, Can I Just Vent? And you were one of the contributors on episode 211, Circulation Software Experts Chime In. And then, I was hoping that we would cross paths again in the future. And we have so much to discuss, my friend.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I do want to touch on episode 145, round 1 of Can I Just Vent? Because it's going to tie into what we talk about right now in my little journey in library land. So,
no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The round 1, round 2, round 3, Can I Just Vent? Are really opportunities that I realized, while we really try to keep so much of our focus on the positive, but the reality is that we all have days where we just come home and it just is so, sometimes it's just work. And it shouldn't have to be. And I absolutely, had one of those days. I just came home in a funk and I was like, there are just certain aspects about my job I sure wish I could change.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Wenndy Pray, for people who have not met you before, who have not crossed paths with you on the planning committee, and maybe they're not going to AASL 2025, would you introduce yourself? Tell us about your library, the grades you serve, and I know it's really beginning of the school year, but this is your brand new school, so you've been there now for maybe almost 2 months.
So actually, I have been at this school this is my second year, but it's interesting because I came back, I left the library for a couple of years. And so this is my first library back, which is probably why you think I just came back. So I've been a librarian for 10 years for people who are listening to us. This is my 10th year in the library, my 18th year as an educator in secondary. So 6th grade through high school. And I've only ever been a librarian in middle school, so 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I was in the library for about 5 years, and then there was just a misalignment with my core values. And so I came to a very, very rough decision, which you'll listen to my conflicting ideologies on that Can I Just Vent episode. I'll just say that because I was very much in it at the time where it was work and work that you wish you could change. Absolutely. And so that kind of just put me in a crossroads. And I said, Wenndy, what are you going to do? And I remember thinking of myself as Gollum in Lord of the Rings and the ring, but in a positive way, because I was like, the ring is the library. It's librarianship. It's my idea of being in the library. It's my love and passion for, opening the doors of wisdom to kiddos and watching that aha moment happen for them. And what are you going to do to preserve that love? Like, are you going to stay here fixing Chromebook after Chromebook after Chromebook and drowning in plastic and, Chromebook triage? Like, it's killing you. It's killing your passion for what you do. So you need to make a decision. It's really, really hard. I left the library after 5 years and went to teach credit recovery students. So for those of us that are international listeners, credit recovery is where students in high school, they could be 16, 17, all the way up to 20 years old in some instances, where they're in high school and they cannot fulfill their credit requirement to graduate. And so the school kind of puts them on this quote unquote emergency plan to try to get them to graduate in as, the least amount of time as possible. And so a neighboring district was reabsorbing that program into their high school. And it was an opportunity for me to design something new. And I said, you know what? Let me apply for this job. I have English as my background, secondary English teacher. I can also teach Spanish. I'm bilingual. I'm from the borderlands of South tip of Texas. And so I said, let's try this out. Let me try something new. And so I came to this place not knowing all the ins and outs, nuts and bolts of it. And so I was there for 2 years. And that really put my identity to the test as far as who I thought I really was as a librarian and what that could look like, or what is the physical manifestation of that for students who would never visit a library on their own. Kind of like a put your money where your mouth is. Now you have to prove it, Wenndy. What type of librarian are you? What type of true literacy advocate are you? And I was there for 2 years, and I did some fabulous things with those kiddos. And then I've been back. I've been back in the library of a middle school in that same district. This is my second year. So it's been quite a journey. Yes, absolutely.
I give you a lot of credit because signing up for something like credit recovery means you're working with students who have already failed in what we would consider to be the traditional classroom setting. This has not worked.
Right.
And forgive me, but sometimes
Correct.
It means they've also tried doing this online, like remotely, and it also did not work. And so
Right.
they are
Right.
doing basically like an online class, but in a supervised situation where you're the educator as facilitator.
Right.
And making sure that
Yes.
while they are taking their classes online, they are doing so in a room full of support and encouragement. And small twist here. This is a relatively new situation. I am our new online coordinator in my school.
Oh,
So
okay.
while I am also overseeing the Learning Commons, because our online students, when they are, I want to say homeless, when they are in the school, but it's that time during which they would be online. Yeah, so they work in our library.
Yeah.
So it works out really well. And I am trying to be that sort of human in the equation of that the online class. But again, you've got kids who oftentimes when they were in the class weren't willing to work in that sort of dynamic. But they also need some like an accountability partner.
Yeah. Or sometimes you just weren't coming to school at all, So how do you help them understand or acknowledge and accept that, hey, something's got to change and you need to start coming back to school, and baby steps. Be here, and then we'll work on these computer modules together while you're here. It's like a rehabilitation of sorts, I would argue.
Well, and I think that districts are smart because they realize that if you're going to have these students in the room, you also need to have a point of contact. You need to have a point of contact. You need to have a human in the equation who is that, again, the administration and the school officials can reach out to a human in their space.
Yes.
And the students can reach out to that human. The parents, if they have concerns, there is a point of contact, a human that they can reach out to who's a representative of the school district.
Yes.
And it really is, as I tell my students when I'm trying to explain my role, I said it's kind of a CYA of that's what I am. I am the CYA for the district, for the online program.
Yeah.
I'm here to make sure all of this works.
Yep.
And if something runs afoul, we're going to try and realign our what we're doing. And so in some respects, I have absolutely every awareness of some of the things that you are doing. But, I have to ask you, though, when you were working as credit recovery coordinator, how did you see those skills as a librarian come to the surface? Because you were always a librarian. You never stopped. It was always in your soul. But how did you find those reminders of your librarianship rising to the surface when you were working in credit recovery?
I gotta tell you, Amy, when I decided to leave the library, I did not feel that once a librarian, always a librarian. I was stretching my hands out, trying to grab every shred of librarian identity that I could to cover me, and it was my safety blanket. And so I always was trying to find things that would help me re-identify, because I felt like being removed from the quote unquote heart of the school physically. And then in this particular campus, the credit recovery portable building was in the very back of the school by the baseball field. So you're talking I'm not just physically removed from the library. I'm almost ousted to the outer limits of humanity, right? And I almost felt like I'm struggling with that part of me. I was used to being, for lack of a better phrase, front and center, the avenue of help for teachers with instructional technology, collaborating, co-teaching, doing all this fun stuff that's in the middle of it all. And now I didn't have that. And so I tried to grab everything that I could. And when I learned that I was this point of contact, as you're mentioning, right? I was this one person who was going to make sure that nobody killed themselves in there, for one. Everybody was safe at all times. People are focused, doing, meeting their marks or their benchmarks or their requirements, their completion stats, what have you. I realized that it was very boring. It was very boring. So they use a computer program, and because all the students need something different, I could not, everybody stop, let me do this one lesson, because people just an array, a variety of credits and courses that they needed to do. So while they each did their own thing on this computer system, I found time to break the monotony of that boredom with library programming things. I found and discovered that the students, because of truancy, for example, hadn't been to school in the last 2 years at all, had missed out on all the amazing and awesome career technology education courses. So these kiddos, while they were expected to, as soon as you're done, you're out the door, find yourself a job, either at vocational school, either at a community college, what have you, they did not have the preparation to do that, for example, with writing a resume. They didn't have basic computer skills of what, as a word, I know I'm just going to date myself right now, word processing tool that you're using, right? So I had to teach them, hey guys, this is Google Docs or Microsoft Word. You need to be versatile, right? These are the different controls. It's not like you're typing text on your cell phone. This is how you write a professional email, things that we would teach freshmen, right? Or things that we would collaborate with different classes on in our own libraries. That's what I did for them, for one thing. Another thing I did for them was introduce the idea of writing a grant. And I kind of stumbled on this because because we were so remote, thrown in the back of the school. There's no landscaping back there. You're in the barren wasteland of South Texas. I was like, okay, this is horrible. Who wants to come to school and look at this patch of dirt? It's depressing. And so I said, I'm going to write a grant for some landscaping and we'll put native plants back here and it'll be like a butterfly garden. And then I read the fine print of this grant and it has to be written and led by students. I said, holy cannoli, how am I going to get credit recovery kiddos who don't want to do any extra work, anything extra that they don't have to do? How am I going to get them to buy in? And miraculously, I just kept pitching it just the way we would in the library. Pitch that book talk, pitch that program you're doing during lunch, pick that, pitching all the neat things that we do in the library, same approach. And I ended up getting one to buy in. And if one buys in, you know what happens to the rest. And it was a fabulous story. I really hope to write about it one day. That's another thing I did with them. Really equip them. Yeah, it was rehabilitative for me. And then now that I think about it in retrospect, it must have been the same for them, for sure.
Well, and I think what you also did that was vitally important was that you gave them a purpose that was bigger than the immediate needs in front of them on their screen. You created a sense of belonging in that classroom.
Yes.
And not just because you were just there to do a job, but you were going to make it meaningful. And because you were willing to invest your own emotions into this program, I think that they clearly probably picked up on that and realized, oh, geez, so we're not just sitting here doing our work. I was like, oh, okay, we're going to be expected to participate.
Yeah, or you know what? Somebody actually cares about, because also we got to remember, this is the type of kiddo that, like we mentioned earlier, has not succeeded in the traditional classroom environment. So I am guilty of this as a former classroom teacher. If you were that kiddo that, I tried and I tried and I tried and you still wouldn't give anything of yourself, my human aspect, right? Humanity sets into me and is like, you know what? Like, I'm done. If you're done, I'm done. Like, whenever you're ready, I'll be ready. But I don't have the bandwidth for this anymore. And so that was their experience going into credit recovery. A lot of teachers that they had run into in their lives for whatever reason just didn't have that bandwidth anymore. And they knew that. And they know that. This is the type of kiddo that you can't sugarcoat things. They can take things as raw as they come. And so I think when they saw a librarian in a different light also, I will say, because they would tell me that themselves, Mrs. Pray, you're not like any other librarian that I've ever, this is actually pretty cool, and just leaning into that, both me and them, I think is what made that classroom work.
Well, and I think it's very easy when you are dealing with, I think it is entirely possible that when you're dealing with a population of students who have a history of perhaps not connecting with school in the way that so many of us would hope our students do. I think it is especially difficult because when you realize working with students who chronically struggle, when educators, specific teachers and school librarians, something that runs consistent through all of us is that we were the kids who loved school. We were the kids who loved going to school, who loved being in class, who at some point in being in school envisioned what would it be like if I got to work in a school. And many of us, that was a very easy transition to make when we decided to pick a career for ourselves. And yet when you go into a situation where you're in credit recovery, where students have repeatedly failed for a variety of reasons, there's already this sort of, I don't want to say tension, but there's this awareness that you have you. You are the human sunshine in a room with some students whose feelings and overall attitudes about academics may not come from the same space,
Absolutely.
And yet,
for sure.
As an educator and librarian, you're able to bridge that gap. And we've had to do that sometimes as educators and librarians when you recognize that we loved school as kids and we are working with students for whom this is a living nightmare. And really just being in school is already a battle that had to be fought just to get them into the building. And, it's really hard. And we have to always recognize, we have to remember that we have to make space, not just for the kids who love our libraries and love our schools and love being in school, but we also have to make room in our hearts for the students who really just want to get this over with. And treat them no differently than we do the ones who want very much to be there. And so I don't know. I've been reminded of that.
And to also stretch ourselves to go there, because I feel like sometimes just to provide the level of service that we want to those who do want to be there and who do want to learn can be exhausting. And so it also due to the nature of our work, we don't have time to sit and contemplate and critically evaluate, everything that's going on in our space, but to just remember that there's other folks that you've never seen in the entire school. How do you have them in mind when you create your programming and when you approach your library on the day-to-day?
Mm-hmm. And it really is, I think what became glaringly apparent to me when I was working with students who really were already checked out is the ones when they started counting down the days till graduation. And it was some of us come here because we love coming to school, right? Some of us have made a decision to come here even after graduation because this is our favorite place in the world, and this is the only place we want to be. And you get those kids who are already counting down till they, hey, it's Monday, and they're like, oh, only 4 more days of school this week. I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? That's what.
Well, let's make them a banner 4, y'all. Let's make an amazing 4 days.
And so again, we have to be that, not just that positivity, but we have to be compassionate when we recognize that these students, we have to make sure that we also are able to bring them in and make them feel like they're part of this experience, and hopefully they'll join us and they'll be on board at some point. So, I'm super curious. So let's talk about you're in a middle school, which has a stark contrast from your credit recovery, which was out, you were sort of the equivalent of Pluto, way out there. And can I ask? Your middle school library. Can you tell us a little bit about your schedule and what do you feel really makes your middle school program really exciting?
So my middle school is actually one of the feeder campuses to where I was with credit recovery. So it's the same population demographic of kiddo. I actually have walked into a very unique dynamic because before my credit recovery teaching experience, I was in a very affluent district with high achiever population, readers, definitely. People were readers coming into the library. This particular middle school, I would argue, is the opposite, and not by its own doing. I came in a very interesting dynamic because the state scores for the assessments that students have to take are in the range where I could see administration becoming a little more introspective and walking around more with a magnifying glass, what is going on in the classrooms. We need to do something about these scores. We're in the yellow, if you will. We don't want to be in the red. And so I walked in to at least year 3 of this library being closed to students, believe it or not. So I walked in with the reading culture, I would argue, at an all-time low, because it, quote unquote, takes away from instruction. Coming to the library is an extra thing that we don't have time for, and every minute counts. Every minute counts, which of course is like nails on a chalkboard, right, to a librarian. It's like, are you kidding me right now? But, I could definitely empathize with that approach for someone who has not, or for administrators who never get to see an embedded librarian model, which is why it's so important for our listeners and those of us who support libraries who are listening to know the modern library and the modern librarian is not the librarian you grew up with. It's not the shush person. It's not this like archaic idea of, this older lady with the bun and glasses shushing everybody. It's a place where learning is happening and where the sounds of learning are happening. And if administrators or people that are making decisions don't ever see that, they carry these stereotypes into their leadership models and into the decisions they make that directly impact student academic achievement. This is research. And I'll give you, the articles, Amy, so we could put on the show notes. I walked into this library. So when the whole of the nation is battling book bans and censorship, I have found myself at the grassroots, bottom, basic level of right to access. Like that is my battleground, if you will. The library deserves to be open for all, not just elective classes because they are not core, which is the argument that I have heard. Right now, my current battle is infusing, again, like all librarians, when you come into a new school, it's building those relationships with your teachers, right? I have a flexible schedule. Right now, it's pretty much open season. Whatever you need from me, I am here for you. Bring in your class. I don't care what it is. Let's make some magic happen because we need to sell this, right? I'm marketing the library. I want you to just taste that it is good and then spread it to everybody else. That's what I want you to do. And I've been lucky. This first year, people are hungry. The educators at this campus are hungry for change. And so one of them, which I was so happy, and I was like, oh my God, it's so cool that you are a U.S. history teacher. And it was an English class, which was a little shocking, but I can totally understand. But it was a U.S. history teacher. And she was like, can I just bring my kids to read? I want them to have something to read. I said, oh my God. And she's a reader too. And that's all it took. But right now I have one of the coolest things I've done for these kiddos and for the teachers, because the teachers had never seen anything like it, was open up lunch as an option for recess for anything and everything that you may need. And Fridays we have games. But right now I want to build advocates in my students. I want them to like it. And when the library is closed, I want them to complain about it. Because they are our customers. I talk about using the word customers in the episode of Student Ambassadors. I treat all of my people like if they're customers. By the way, before I became an educator, I was in the hospitality industry, which is another reason why that comes to mind, is calling them customers. I want you to know that this place is for you. Whatever you want, it is my job to get for you. Whatever your learning journey, whatever your task is, I want you to find it in the library. Your library needs to be your go-to. And so that's been, all the programming that I do, with that lunch recess being a huge success. I mean, I had meeting after meeting with my admin about the concerns that they may have about anything. I mean, safety, they threw it all at me, and I was so happy that I could tackle that. It was so awesome. And I sold it. I opened it. I featured it on an ASL takeover on Insta. I did not give administration an opportunity to say no. I sold it to the point to where they could not say no. So that's been a super successful thing. Last year, I was not able to open it before school or after school, believe it or not. I was not allowed to open the library before school, not allowed to open it after school. And this year, I was so happy that an outside entity looked in and said, your scores are pretty low. What are you doing to build a reading culture in your school? Now that our administration has been put under a microscope about what they're intentionally implementing to build a reading culture, now they are opening the doors to have classes come and check out books. And you best believe I took advantage of that silver lining, because sometimes, oh no, we have this person looking in. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. In Spanish, we have a saying that roughly translates to nothing bad happens without something good coming of it. So I'm going to take that with me and run. And I have. My circulation, Amy, is up 300%. It's insane. It is insane. But yeah, my next goal for them is to open it at the beginning of school, because everybody has the right to access their library before school. It's that level. I want to open it after school because everybody has the right to have access to their school library after school. So I am finding so much fulfillment in championing that for my kiddos because I know what it's like in credit recovery if they don't have that for them. And that's my quote unquote cred. That's my credibility. I haven't been just only to the trenches. I've been in the trenches, digging the trenches with these kiddos. So I know their future when you don't give them access to books or give them a welcoming space in the library. I've seen that with my own eyes. I've taught that with my own eyes. Let me bring that and help you and help them more than anything else.
Well, and friends, those of you tuning in for whom, having your learning commons or your library space open before school and open after school is something that you've walked into. This was, you inherited this. Please show a little bit of understanding for the challenge. We've all at some point in our lives have had to initiate a program that was not there. I have walked into a situation where there was zero reading culture, and realizing that for so many of my colleagues, you've never experienced that in your life.
Right.
We've all had, at some point in our careers, been in the unenviable position of having to initiate something and fight like heck to get it because it just wasn't a thing. And so I have so much respect for you because while I do have the benefit of inheriting a space, which, we've always opened at 7 a.m., we close at 4:15. It is the best thing I can say. And I'll be honest, not because I'm there running it, because my school values the access to the space. Maybe not for the books, but as a holding place for kids to go before and after school that is centrally located and supervised. But still, all of us can relate to wanting to start something and being well aware that for many people, that's something they've just walked into. They've just walked into this situation where you just have this already laid out and common practice. So you're fighting the good fight. I mean, never discount that, the work that goes into trying to change people's minds when it comes to something that for us as librarians is so obvious.
Yeah.
You are in your middle school right now, and most people would just sort of sit back and say, "Hey, I'm back in the library. I'm good. I'm good." And yet, you very recently joined the ranks of the school librarians in my life who are committed to writing a doctoral dissertation. You've made this monumental commitment, one which I will never choose, but I am so happy for you and your journey. Would you please share with us, because you came to this, it wasn't something that I think has always been there. You arrived at this decision because of the twists and turns that your career has taken. Am I right?
Yeah, actually, I was presented with the opportunity to apply to Texas Tech University here in Texas. And I was never going to get a doctorate because the state of Texas really doesn't give you any sort of monetary stipend or anything like that, like other states do. But I was granted a 4-year scholarship and I was like, yay, let's go. And so I said, when am I ever going to get this chance? Right. And so I said, let's do it. And that was the 5th year that I was in the library. So right when I did that Can I Just Vent episode, right? Dealing with all these issues about fixing Chromebooks. This is not what librarianship is. This is not what being a librarian is. And so I had an inkling of what I wanted to research, but I didn't know how to do it, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. I'm just, jumping into this PhD program at Texas Tech. And what ensued was, after that first year of study, I went to credit recovery and I'm doing coursework this entire time. And then now I'm back into middle school and I said, I know what I'm going to do. I am going to write arts-based research, which is more creative writing than traditional research. And when I incorporate poetic inquiry, which is a type of expression that kind of would I guess, expand on things that traditional research can't do or quantitative statistics can't do for you, just the human experience. And I'm going to focus it on me because I worked with a population of students that's marginalized and protected, right, by the International Review Board. And I was their teacher. They would never allow me to interview them. They would never allow me to use any of the things that they created with me. And so I said, I'm going to talk about being displaced, being taken from the library, what that does to one's professional identity, and what that can show us about other librarians that are displaced in one form or another. I was displaced both physically, right, and mentally, I would argue, because you're not in that space anymore. But there are many librarians that are being let go from their jobs. There are many librarians that are being pushed back into settings and duties that don't align with their identity, their professional identity as librarians. And so this is an autoethnographic work, which means that it is like an autobiography, but the ethnography piece is the part that sheds light on the culture that you're reflecting on. So I aim to, in this research, share my story, as all librarians should do. We are storytellers, right? But we always tell someone else's story. We're always reading someone else's story. We never tell our own story. So I'm hoping to share my story and shed light on the librarian culture of all those who are displaced in some way or another, like I was. So that, my friend, is my research for my PhD. Yeah.
Well, and I got to tell you, again, in the category of things I will never do is write a dissertation, and I'm so excited because it sounds like this is a kind of investment in yourself, because it is examining how the path that led you to where you are now, how it really did come from a place of introspection and recognizing. Ultimately, you and I have changed jobs over the course of several years that we've known each other.
Yeah.
And I think what's remarkable is when you have found yourself in a set of circumstances that are less than supportive, a set of circumstances which really, well, let's just face it, I've called it on the show a slow death, a slow death. Exploration, your PhD, and what kind of research that you're going to be doing is into yourself and the lived experience, and how being removed from the space where you were most at home, most comfortable, most supported, and being put into a space where you really, it was a very, I don't see how you can thrive, and you did remarkably well under the given circumstances. So I think it's fascinating. In my many years on this planet, I've never seen the word autoethnography. And I'm fascinated because it sounds like your research process is going to be very customized towards the experiences that you've had, would you say, like in the last 7 years?
It's actually going to focus on the last 4 years, which is the last year that I was in the library before my credit recovery experience, the 2 years that I was there, and then the 1 year returning to the library. The reason why I am studying just those 4 years is because I am incorporating the idea of liminality. And this term was brought up back in the 1900s by a French ethnographer named Arnold van Gennep. And he was studying the rituals in tribes and different cultural entities where, like, you had to do something to become a man, for example, or like in the Hispanic culture, I would equate it to the quinceañera, right, where you have this party and now you've gone from being a girl to being a woman and things like that. And so he was kind of studying about what is this transition between what you were before, that separation, that in-between space, which he called liminality, and then the new person that you are, which he called post-liminal. And so I think that mirrors perfectly what I went through. And it gives it a perfect lens to examine my experience, right? A place like you mentioned, Amy, I was supported. I was supporting other teachers. There's a reading culture there. Then being taken from that, or that separation, and then the chaos that happens. There was another ethnographer named Victor Turner who said, hey, it's not just separating, but now you have like this chaotic thing that happens when you leave the familiar. Now you have this unfamiliar feeling. You have this sense of an anti-structure, right? It's totally alien to you. What happens to your identity then? How are you trying to get a hold of yourself or mitigate, get your bearings during this time? And then how does that change you after you do this? People do this all the time when they get married, for example. It's not just to like tribes or ritualistic things. People go through this sort of thing all the time, these transitional phases all the time. And so I'm using that idea of liminality to kind of explore my experience as well.
But I love this. I mean, and the meaning, it becomes so meaningful because it's so connected to who you are and exploring that journey. I can only imagine that. I've oftentimes heard people talk about people writing their dissertation, and it's never with a great deal of fondness.
Yeah, it's always like super hard
I've
work.
Seen that on social media.
Yeah.
There's the picture of the elephant, and how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. Yep.
But it sounds like this particular approach that you've taken to your dissertation is far more invested in you and your lived experience. You know, I've said this a couple times relatively recently when it comes to people who in my life have made the choices that they have and they have the careers where they are because they have actively made choices to uproot themselves and do something else. And I'm not shy about my own personal journey. I have changed careers. I have changed districts several times. And I've always done so because I was leaving a situation for something that was better. And selfishly for me, it had to be better for me. And I wrote this to somebody recently because, you know, change can be scary.
Yeah.
But I choose happiness.
Yep.
And when you realize that we spend so much of our lives at work, and if we are not happy, then something's got to change.
Right.
And that's not always an easy thing to do because it's so counterintuitive to leave something that you know for something that you don't.
Right.
But what you know is that if you aren't happy, the person who can fix that is you.
Yeah.
And obviously there are risks. There are obvious risks involved when you decide to make a change and go someplace else and do something different. But the willingness to take those risks means that you are interested in being happy. And there's a risk involved, but you absolutely are living proof that this always turns out all right. I mean, and you know, I'm sure when you first started this journey that it really, you couldn't see the end of the road, but you absolutely knew you were at least moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, not always, because sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what did I do? Like, Wenndy, are you sure you wanted to leave? Are you sure you can call yourself a librarian? Like, how can you be in these circles? You know, how can you? And then you also feel the vibe in the room when people know that you're not in the library. And sometimes it's not a positive thing. And so that also casts, you know, some more doubt, some more self-doubt on your own judgment of how you handled your things. But I think in retrospect, you're right. I mean, I didn't know that I was going to grow in a way that would monumentally change my contribution to research in a creative way, because I never saw myself as a traditional academic. I mean, I could never do the surveys. I can't do the data. Like, that to me is boring. I'm not saying it's not valuable. It definitely is, but it's not me as a researcher. And when I discovered arts-based research, when I discovered poetic inquiry, when I discovered that the school librarian story is missing in autoethnography, I said, this is my chance to make a contribution, and it will not have all been for nothing. Not only did I grow, but my students also got to experience the library, even if it was in a slightly interesting way, right? Through me. I have some that, I used to read to them, Amy. These are 18, 19-year-olds. I used to read to them as my lunch at the end of the day. They were riveted, loved me reading aloud to them. And I'm happy that that's what they'll remember, And even though they missed the library through their, secondary years of education, they met this lady in a portable in the back of a school that helped reset their heart a little bit about reading and about the library. And that's golden. How can you argue with that? Take that with you.
I loved when you posted that your doctoral dissertation had been accepted by the committee. And I looked at the committee because you shared and was like, wait, Dr. Heather Moorfield Lang is on your committee?
Yeah.
I was like,
yep,
Dr. Heather Moorfield Lang, we were in Salt Lake together. Dr. Heather Moorfield Lang's been on my show. And I absolutely love and adore the work that she does. And she's an amazing person. For me, I wanted to interview her because a listener had reached out to me and said, you should interview my favorite professor from library school. And I'm like, you're right.
Awesome.
And I was just like, wow, I wish that Dr. Heather Moorfield Lang had been in my library school. But I love learning from her. And I saw that she was on your committee. And I thought, you're in good hands. You are in very good hands.
I think so too. I'm so happy she agreed. Recruiting for your committee is like proposing marriage. That's what I would equate it to. So you have to be very strategic, and you have to really know what the professors are known for, like what type of research they've written and contributed to, what journals, they appear on, et cetera. And I too met Dr. Moorfield Lang at East Salt Lake City. I did not know her before. And she and I just stayed in contact. And then I just said, hey, how would you feel about, because at Texas Tech, there's no library program. And because my research, just depends on librarianship and that lens, I needed an expert in the field. And I said, hey, this is a perfect opportunity to bring her along. And she said, yes, yay. So worked out great.
And I think it's wild because that's, again, sort of bring it back home to this idea of going to a national conference. This is where you make those real quick, like 5-minute conversations, those real quick meet and greets, just an opportunity to be like, you know what, I crossed paths with you at this conference. Let's now build on that initial meeting and really sort of collaborate on something that could have a lasting impact. And so, no, I absolutely am so grateful that became something really significant in your journey. I think it's wonderful. But, Wenndy, I am so excited for us to see each other very, very soon. You have this amazing program. Could you give us just an idea, looking down the road, when is your journey going to, in terms of the dissertation, when are you going to be ready to defend it?
Okay, so I am writing for this entire semester in the fall. My goal is to be finished with a rough draft by January, February, and then finalize and defend around maybe March or so. And then I should graduate in May. That's my goal. But again, life happens sometimes, but that's my goal. So everybody send me your positive vibes so that I can make this happen, so that it comes to fruition. Yes, everybody, send me all your good things.
Wonderful. And we selfishly got this conversation in before you started writing, and I'm so grateful. I'm going to see you in a couple weeks.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you give us an idea? I know we can put your social media in the links in our show notes.
Yes.
And maybe, we'll put a couple links in there. But this is very exciting. I'm so excited for you. Yes. And selfishly, I'm so glad that we could share your story with listeners. I know that people take something away from these conversations. And it's really vitally important that we shine a light on those of us who are making choices that are courageous and selfish and important and meaningful. But listen, would you let listeners know, where can we see you on social media? Because I love every time you post something. Again, you are human sunshine.
Yes. Okay, everyone. So I am on Bluesky at Wenndy Pray. And then on Instagram, which is where I post the most, I am at Pray Tell Librarian altogether. Pray Tell Librarian on Instagram. I'd love to connect.
Wonderful, wonderful. Listen, I wish you the very best, and I will see you very, very soon in St. Louis, and have a fantastic evening. And thank you so much for your time tonight.
Yes, ma'am. You too. See you soon.
Friends, if you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. If you're curious to know how often your state or country has been featured on the podcast, then simply click on the link, which can be found in our show notes, search by title, author, state, and country, and do a Command F search. I hope that this is the year you consider being a guest on the show. Please visit the FAQs in every episode, and you'll realize just how easy it is. We all have something to share. Make Season 8 your time to shine. Friends, I'm currently juggling several outlines and tentative recording dates. You can be sure our upcoming episodes will showcase amazing school librarians sharing their strategies and resources. I hope you will tune in.